Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. We are here today with Dr. Laura Hayes from Charlotte, North Carolina. Laura, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, me too. And you've got quite the story. So let's take a moment. We're going to welcome our audience. So thank you everyone for chiming in. Super grateful to have you, following the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. This is going to be a really great conversation getting into your overall well-being and the importance of, how we make those shifts. So share this with a friend. Make sure you tell them if you see somebody who needs some inspiration on how to take care of themselves. Please make sure you do share this podcast and let us know how we're doing. We always appreciate reviews and give us feedback on what we're doing right and what stories you would like to hear more of. So let's jump in. So Dr. Laura, thank you again for being here. I want to give the audience a little bit of context so they know who you are before you and I jump into this conversation. Laura is a renowned board certified emergency physician. She's a dynamic speaker and a certified coach. She has a wealth of experience in leadership and education. She has made significant strides in her field, notably as the chair and medical director of her department during the onset of the COVID pandemic. Can't even imagine what you went through COVID, and even still today, it's crazy the things that are happening. But her exceptional leadership skills were instrumental in helping her to maintain the effectiveness and the integrity with her team during these challenging periods. She's also an esteemed assistant professor at Campbell School of Medicine and was peer voted Doctor of the Year at her sizeable medical center. So, Laura, congratulations. Lots of accolades. You're doing lots of stuff. And then I know you've also turned to be a bit of a yogi. So let's jump in and learn really more about your story and how we move from emergency room physician into being a yoga instructor and focusing on people's overall well-being.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again for having me. It's really a pleasure to just meet new people and have these interesting conversations. I love this podcasting world for that reason too. So, as you mentioned, I've been a emergency physician now for quite some years, but the yogi in me has been there even longer. So, I actually started practicing yoga when I was about 18 years old, and then eventually in my early 20s got certified, started teaching. And that was a really big part of my journey into medicine, keeping me grounded, helping to keep me grounded, I should say, during my medical school, then medical training, and eventually becoming a practicing attending physician. It's always sort of been there holding my hand alongside me as I've gone through this journey. And I could certainly talk a lot more about that, but it's really become part of who I am over these last 20, 25 years. So, but as you mentioned, I still practice emergency medicine. Right before we got on this call, I was mentioning that I just worked until 3 o'clock in the morning, but here I am, bright-eyed. So, still practice clinically, and as you mentioned, I've had some leadership roles throughout my career. Pretty much since I finished residency, I've been in some sort of teaching role or leadership role, and I enjoyed being in that type of role. It's a little bit the mom in me as well, being able to take care of others and keep people held together and things. So that's something that I've always really enjoyed. And over these last couple of years, at the tail end of the pandemic, learning so much about myself, about leadership, about general well-being for myself and others through that time, really allowed me to take a step back and say, okay, how am I feeling right now in my journey in this part of my career? What do I want? What is my purpose? Where can I find my true meaning, my aspiration? And how do I put all of that together to really meet up and match with one of my main core values, which is service to others? And my husband and I have talked for many years about how do we blend this world of mindfulness, mind-body connection, self-awareness, leadership skills, along with our medical practice and our clinical practice. And so over this last 2 years or so, we developed a health coaching and consulting company called Lasting Impact Wellness. And we have a podcast by the same name. And and we really, it sort of birthed itself because of our other interests, but also Honestly, Vicki, of seeing a lot of patients and looking into the eyes of a lot of patients without sounding too dramatic, and holding the hands of a lot of patients who were really on that verge of their last breaths, and being with them and realizing that for some of these people, they really were wishing for more life.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling of, how can we have more good years added on to our life? It's not just about living longer. It's about living healthy longer, about being able to continue to do the things that bring you joy, to continue to have the connections that really light you up. So that was really the foundation for us starting this new company, of saying, how can we help people to really start to live their life to the fullest, be their best selves, reconnect with themselves, and not necessarily prevent them from coming to see us in the emergency department. Of course, people get sick, tragedies happen, traumas always occur, but maybe we can help prevent them from having the sequela of some of these chronic diseases, or help them to avoid some chronic diseases altogether, or understand their chronic conditions better and find ways to live with them and manage them in a bit more of a sustainable way.
Yeah. You touched on a number of things that I may take us kind of all over here, Laura.
No, feel free.
But
Yes.
I do like several things I heard you say there that are so important is one, it's not maybe how long, it's the quality you have while you're here, right? And we oftentimes, I think, get into that spiral of even the mental narrative that we share with ourselves, that I'm sick, I'm not well. And there's such a shift when you start taking care of yourself. That's, to me, that's so important. And when you were talking about your own self-care during the pandemic, and even some of the things you had to do with your team, like, you're under tremendous stress. I'm sure you were working probably 20-hour day shifts. So how does somebody begin? Because we from an average person in society, we all feed ourselves badly. We sit on our bottoms way too much. How do you begin that journey of wellness?
The first step is to be an active participant in your own life. That is the first step. It's so many of us, and I say us because I'll include myself in this, we are on this autopilot mode that we all are aware of. We know that it exists, but some of us are better than others at recognizing it. So we're on this autopilot mode. We're on this never ending treadmill of our lives that never seems to be able to slow down. And so the first step is realizing and recognizing that you're part of that treadmill too, and you're maybe on that autopilot mode, and that's normal, that's natural. It's part of life. You wake up, you take a shower, you make your coffee, you make your breakfast, you get your kids to school, you make your lunch, you go to work, you come home, you're tired, maybe you get 20 minutes of exercise in, and it's that same cycle over and over again. And if you are not taking the time to just pause and first just check in and say, okay, where am I right now? Not just physically, where am I, but where am I physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? How am I truly feeling? And then taking that inventory of, okay, this is how I feel in those realms, but then what's the next step? What do I need right now? And I even take that a step further and say, what do I need, but what do I not need anymore? What's sucking my soul right now? What are the things that are dimming my light or burning me out? And then creating some real changeable action to move forward. And a lot of people say, I just don't have time. I don't have time to make a change. I don't have time to, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to worry about what I'm eating. I don't have time to meal prep, or whatever the thing is. But, we all feel that way. We all feel like there's not enough hours in the day to just get it all done that we need to get done. But if we allow ourselves to just stay on this treadmill, to stay on this never-ending autopilot mode, then eventually, there's a saying of life catches up with you.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually, you are going to realize that maybe there were some red flags along the way that you either ignored or just simply didn't recognize because you were too distracted. Life was too chaotic. But that's when things creep in, like diseases and,
100%.
various ailments that, are endless. So I think that first step, like I said, is it's that notion of just saying to yourself, I am done with being a passive bystander in my own life. I'm done with sitting on the sidelines and watching life happen to me. And I am now going to make life happen for me. And how can I do that? And it just takes A, the choice to do that. And then B, just say, okay, where do I start? Let's take a small step
One
today.
thing.
One thing. Let's just take a small step. And then tomorrow we can take the next step, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. A number of things you mentioned there, like autopilot. And this is something I'll ask our audience. Check in with yourself here. When you're on that commute to work or you're getting ready in the morning, are you conscious of what you're doing? Right. And I'll, as you said, we're all guilty. I remember driving to work and then getting there and going, how did I even get here? Like, I don't remember one thing I saw because I was already so busy with my to-do list in my head that I wasn't focused on how do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world today? And I think what you just mentioned is so important. And we see so many of us, both men and women, but women more so because we have more of the domestic responsibilities, plus we have our own careers. And we don't slow down long enough to look at what is serving us and what's not serving us. So I love what you said there, and it does creep in. And I will share my own story in that regard because I spent a lot of years in corporate, and then one day I woke up and I wasn't okay. And there's those, to your point, the red flags were there, but I ignored. And so it does catch up. So I love how you describe that. And I'm sure that, from a emergency room doctor, you're seeing all kinds of different things that show up for people. And then when you go to lasting impact, you get to have those great aha moments where you see that change starting to happen and people starting to really take care of themselves.
Yeah. And I'll even steal your example of the driving. There is no better analogy for our lives than the one you just mentioned. And I think in one of our podcast episodes, we talk about self-awareness. And I use that analogy that happens to me all the time. My commute to my hospital where I work currently is about an hour from my home. So I have found myself numerous times driving, and just like you described, you think, oh my gosh, how did I get all the way to work? Or how did I get to this exit? And you're listening to music, you're distracted, you're thinking about the 25 things you need to do when you get home from work that day, whatever it may be. But I think that's really a great analogy for life too. It's as though you're on this highway. Forgive me for sounding cheesy, but it's as though you're on this highway of your life.
Yeah.
And what you don't want is you drive, and you're not paying attention. And then suddenly you snap and you wake up to feeling, oh my gosh, how did I get all the way to this exit?
Yeah.
Which way am I supposed to go? Did I miss my turn? Did I miss that right I was supposed to take, or the left I should have taken? Because we're just sort of in that mode and we're just driving along. Yeah. So the key is, as you mentioned, just really tuning in and tapping in. And, I think sometimes listeners may think, oh, well, we hear this all the time. Okay. You tap in, you listen to your body. There's nothing new here, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It really is it really is that simple. It's a lot of it is giving yourself permission to slow it down just momentarily, to take that pause and do that check-in so that you don't wake up, 50 miles or 50 years later. Yeah. Wondering, how the heck did I get where I am? And do I even like where I am right now?
Exactly. And that takes me back to when you first started speaking about your purpose, right? Like, so often we are caught on that hamster wheel or an autopilot, and we're not even thinking about what our purpose is. And I love what you shared with how you saw what was happening in the emergency room, and then you started incorporating the things that were really important to you, that provide you that self-care, provide you that purpose. And I remember one time a client said to me, I said, okay, blank slate now, because she had just left her career. And I said, blank slate now. I said, what would you want to do? You have a completely blank canvas. You get to pick. And it was so interesting because she said, she went dead quiet, and I thought maybe we got disconnected. And then she goes, oh, this is really sad, but I've never even thought about it. And I said, well, this is your time, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're, at a certain age and all of a sudden you go, I've never thought about it. Every day is a new day to think about it. And so I love how you've taken what you're passionate about, both in serving others, but also in serving yourself. And you've incorporated the two. I think, to me, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. And it's not easy to get there. And I'm still a work in progress. But yeah, that's a hard question to ask people, what's your purpose, or, what's your meaning in life? I mean, these are pretty philosophical, introspective, deep questions, but ask them. And there is no right or wrong answer. There's no time like the present to start sorting it out. And for me, and for a lot of our clients and just people I've worked with and friends, even when I've had these conversations, a lot of it really is about taking that pause and then asking yourself, what are those things in my life that I value most? And if you can figure out what those are, write those down, even make a little list, identify those. We use the term core values, as you know, but identify those core values. And all that means is those values that are at the root of who you are, that will be there no matter what you're doing in your life, no matter what environment you're in. Those are the values that are there with you, and that's how you show up. You used that term earlier, and I love that term. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, if you asked me what is the most important thing that a leader needs to be aware of, or the greatest attribute of a leader, I would say how you show up matters. And if you are showing up values first every time consistently, then the rest is much less important. That's the important thing. And we all have values. It's just, again, a matter of pausing and saying, what are they? And not what I think they should be, not the textbook answer. Yeah. Not the textbook answer, not what I'm expected to say, and not comparing myself to so-and-so's values, just truly sitting with that and saying, what do I value in my life?
Yeah. Yeah. And just to expand on that for a moment, it's who are you being? Right? Because when you're in alignment with those core values, you do show up every day being that, and you're in alignment with who you are, no matter what's happening. And that's when we remove a lot of the guilt, the shame, the fears, all those things, because you're fully showing up. So what happens, Laura, when you're not in alignment physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? What happens to us? And I'm asking you that from a doctor, but also from a wellness expert.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big question. I could say just about anything and everything happens. Yeah. The key being that we use this term mind-body connection, and really understanding that the mind and the body are in constant communication all the time with one another. Your mind is constantly sending signals to your body through chemical messengers and telling your body what to do, how to act, what actions need to occur for a specific result. And the reverse is also true. Your body is then sending back signals and communicating with your mind. And that alignment piece that you mentioned, being sort of truly aligned, I see as that state of being where you understand your mind-body connection and also have really started to master ways to manipulate it and control it a bit. These things happen in the background automatically in our bodies and our minds, but we do have the ability to tune into them and to manipulate them. And what I mean by that is, again, we talked about that autopilot mode. Mm-hmm. So many of us are on that autopilot mode, and there may be something physical in our body that is occurring, and we're not even intentionally ignoring it. It's not necessarily this big red flag of physical symptom that we're seeing and then we're choosing to ignore. Sometimes we're so disconnected and so out of line that we don't even see the red flag. It could be huge and waving in front of our face, but we truly don't even see it. And that's because we're not tuned in, we're not tapped in, and we're not being intentional. So that's when diseases pop up. That's when things, I mean, gosh, the most common ones that come to mind are GI issues. So irritable bowel syndrome or gastritis, even ulcers can develop, those are big ones. So you can start developing high blood pressure in the background because you're dealing with these chronic stressors and you're not really aware of it, and you're not really managing them very well because, again, you're not really tuning in or recognizing them. And that's when, hypertension comes up. You can have migraines because of stress. I mean, there's so many things that are connected that really you could take almost any disease entity that exists and probably find ways that you could tune in a little bit more closely and find some things to tweak or fine tune. And so not living in alignment, I guess, is where you started the question. It really opens you up to cracks in the system. The more aligned you are, the more fluid that connection can be, and it can shift and it can mold, but it's sort of picture it like your mind and body are dancing, and the more aligned you are, the closer you're dancing, and you're moving together, you're moving smoothly, and things are changing and flowing as they need to. The more disconnected you are, it's like taking the two people dancing and separating them. Picture yourself in the 6th grade trying to dance with your hands on the hips and the shoulders, but 3 feet between you. There are some missteps that can happen. There are some gaps there. There's that disconnection, and there is opportunity for things to slip between and for things to happen on one side that the other side's not aware of. So forgive me, I've never used the dancing analogy before. It just came to mind, but yeah, I mean, the key, like I said, the key is really understanding the connection, knowing that they're connected, and being open to recognize when your body or your mind is sending you a signal saying, hey, this is something that you should probably be paying attention to right now.
Yeah. And just to expand on that, you have the power then to once you recognize it, you do have the power to impact it and shift how it physically is impacting you. And I think that's super important for people to understand. Also, what is that impact on? I mean, we have a lot of women in our audience, and of course, as we age, we all start worrying about, what cosmetics we need to be buying because we're aging, but there's also this component of your age and your vitality that gets impacted. So what do you see when you're connected fully? How does that impact the aging process and an individual's vitality?
Well, so let's say, for example, you take sleep. Sleep is essential. That's where our body and mind do all of its housekeeping. It does all of its restorative functioning. And, sleep is sort of this beautiful processing of everything that you did during your day. And we need it. Our bodies need it. Our minds need it. It's so important. And yet, even though most people would say they understand how important sleep is, maybe they try to prioritize it too. Oftentimes we are our own worst enemies and we self-sabotage when it comes to that category. And we can extrapolate this to all the other categories of well-being: fitness, nutrition, social connection. But let's just stay with sleep for a second. So I meet a lot of people who they want to sleep better. If they slept better, they probably wouldn't feel so tired the next day. They'd have more energy to do things. They would feel like they had more vitality as they're moving through their life. And maybe they read sleep books and they get a noise machine and they do a 5-minute meditation before they go to sleep. So they think they're doing all the right things. They're sort of checking the boxes to get better sleep, but they're not recognizing that the maybe number one reason for their lack of sleep is their stressors that they're carrying with them throughout the day and then taking to bed with them at night. So that's just an example. But so it's this concept of checking the boxes, doing the things we think we're supposed to do, but yet still not quite being there intentionally. And like I said, we could extrapolate that to nutrition. Well, let's say, I mean, gosh, I've done this myself too. You know, we all have foods that we sort of indulge or we splurge on, but then we physically feel
Awful.
awful after. You know, you get like belly cramps, or you have hot flashes when you're sleeping that night or something. And again, I put myself in this category, but and sometimes you might say, you know what, I know I'm going to feel terrible later, but I have to have that thing. It's my favorite thing. That's fine. But there are a lot of people who they eat the thing, they feel like crap, but then they eat the thing again, they feel like crap again, and they just keep doing it instead of really taking that moment to say, wait a minute, is there some behavior of mine that is impacting this feeling that I'm having? Oh, maybe it was the fact that I'm eating this giant thing right before I go to bed, or so, you know, or something like that. So there's so many, all of these, that's the point, is all of these things are connected, right? If you don't sleep well, you're not going to have enough energy the next day to exercise or move your body. If you're not exercising, moving your body, you're going to, by nature, get cravings for things that you maybe even normally wouldn't eat. So then you're not going to make the best dietary choices. And then that's going to affect your emotional health throughout the day, because now you're tired, you're maybe feeling guilty that you haven't exercised, you're feeling even more tired because you haven't moved your body, then you're making poor dietary choices, and then you probably have guilt and shame over some of those things as well. And then you're kind of grumpy or you're irritable and you're stressed out, and then your social connections suffer. And it's just a big vicious cycle. But the cool thing, I think, Vicki, honestly, about this cycle is you can pick one area to just cut in. You can just cut in and say, okay, I'm going to make a small change in this one area. And because it has such a ripple effect on your life, if you make a small positive change in one area, then it truly can have positive lasting impact for those other areas too. And I love that vision in my mind of this ripple effect, because if you think of a ripple in the water, you know, you make one small change, it has all these lasting effects, but it also can start affecting the things, i.e. the people around you in your life too. And wow, I mean, instead of letting that ripple be all negative, what if you change that into some positive action and started to see the results in the people around you too, your children, your spouse, your friends, your colleagues, your teammates. So yeah, just acknowledging that connection is really where it all starts.
I totally agree with you. I think that's so important. And when you were talking about the example of eating something and you shouldn't eat it, where my mind went was back to your comment earlier about autopilot, right? Because sometimes we do that. It can be boredom, it can be lots of different reasons, but we get into that state of autopilot and it just becomes a habit, even if it's, just throw an example, maybe it's you like savory or you like salty, and at night you're eating popcorn, right? And maybe that's not the best thing for you to have at night. But you get into that autopilot and you're not even conscious. You just go, you make the popcorn, you sit, you watch TV, you eat it. And so what I've heard from you today is, how do we take one thing, just one thing, and start to be very conscious of how that impacts us? Is it in alignment with what we truly want for ourselves? If it's not, how do you start to make that shift? And the big thing is being intentional and very conscious of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, love that. Love that. So one thing, just tell us one thing, because I am conscious of time. So one thing that our audience could leave here today and implement that could have that huge ripple effect.
So the one thing goes back to this element of, or this concept of self-awareness. To me, that is the foundation of all well-being. Mm-hmm. I'll give you two things if listeners want something more concrete. But the first thing would be this self-awareness. And I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I'll just throw it in again here. It's that self-inventory, taking inventory of, how am I feeling physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? What do I need or want? And what can I let go of? What's sucking my soul? That's one of my favorite quotes. What's sucking my soul? Because there are things in your life that just feel soul sucking. So how do you just release those? Let them go. And then the third thing is, okay, what's the next step?
Mm.
and doing that self inventory, doing that check in. And this can be done. You can sit on the toilet and leave your phone in the other room for 5 minutes and just take those 5 minutes to do a little self inventory. So getting into some sort of mindfulness practice where you are being intentional about connecting with yourself and figuring out, who the heck am I and what do I want out of this world? Where is my place in this world? So that's, honestly, to me, the biggest thing. But the second little take home is picking one of these categories. So one category of well-being, and that's, self-awareness and mind-body connection is sort of that big one. But then there's fitness and physical movement. There's nutrition and what you're feeding your physical body. And then there's this, element of social connection. So select one of those things that you want to just start as number one, the number one thing you want to improve, and just start really small. So if it's nutrition, maybe you say, I don't really eat a ton of vegetables. I don't like vegetables, but I'm going to find one vegetable that I like. And I'm just going to commit to eating one serving of vegetables per day, or whatever you want it to be, but just keep it simple. Make it one small dietary change for the better that will be nutritious and healthier for you. Yeah. If it's fitness, what I tell people is just pick a time. It doesn't matter. Let's say 20 minutes. Everybody has 20 minutes. If you're listening and you think, I don't have 20 minutes, you know what? You have 20 minutes. You just have to make time for it. But 20 minutes of just physical movement. It doesn't have to look like anything specific. You don't have to go to the gym. It can be walking. It can be jogging. It can be jump rope. It can be dancing. It can be anything. It just means physical movement. And don't put too much pressure on it. Don't overcomplicate it. Just pick a number, 20 minutes a day, and commit. And if it's social connection, a practice that I've gotten into over this last probably 2 years or so, and I don't do it every day. I don't get it perfect every time, but I really am intentional about sending a text to someone when I think of them. And that can be friends from a long time ago. It can be someone I haven't talked to in 2 years. It's sometimes my family members who live far away. And it's just a text that says, thinking of you, hope you're doing well, or thought of you today and it made me smile. And it has really brought back a lot of meaningful connections and relationships and made relationships stronger. Yeah. So again, I think the summary statement would be pause, start to connect to yourself, and keep it simple.
Yeah. Love that. I love that. Keep it simple, pause. We make it harder than it needs to be. I love how you've described it. Just keeping it, take one thing. If you just do that for 2 weeks, right? Just 2 weeks. That is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. But to your point about the ripple, it could have huge impacts on you and everybody around you. So our audience, think about that today. Like as you finish listening to our conversation today, what would be the one thing you would pick? And share that with Dr. Laura and I. Like, reach out to us. Let us know, what are you picking? And, how is that working for you? We all need a support system to sometimes make these things happen, right? So, Laura, how can people find you? I know you mentioned the Lasting Impact podcast. So that's one way they can hear more, learn more. How else can they connect with you?
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. So as you mentioned, our podcast, Lasting Impact Wellness, available wherever you get your podcasts. And then we have our website by the same name. So it's just lastingimpactwellness.com. And you can contact us through the website or send an email at info@lastingimpactwellness.com. And we love connecting with people. It's one of the things that I love about emergency medicine is I meet all kinds of people from all walks of life, of all ages. And you can learn so much from just connecting with other humans. And this podcasting world has been so great for that as well. So I love getting emails from people with questions, whatever. It's really nice to have that technology that allows us to be able to communicate from all over the world. So it's really neat.
Absolutely. I know. I love it too. You and I are probably soul sisters in another lifetime.
Yes, perhaps.
I'm all about connection. To me, that's, and what you were saying there about just reaching out, texting, email, whatever your means, pick up the phone. Let's go a little old fashioned. Pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I'm thinking of you today. Like, because you don't know, that person may not have talked to anybody all day long. And your light really shines on them when you do that. Laura, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been such a pleasure. And we're grateful for you sharing, how you're impacting your own life, but also the ripple effect you're having on others. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure talking with you today. Thanks.
You as well. And our audience, I want to thank you. As I said, if these conversations are important to you, drop us a note. Let us know what you're learning. Let us know what your one thing will be. We'd be super excited to hear that. And Laura shared with you how you can reach out to her. You can reach me at Vicki@Well Empowered, and that's one L in Well Empowered. You can also reach us on, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're in all those hot places. And then just one last thing, only because Dr. Laura brought up connections, we do offer an on-demand networking, love it or hate it webinar, which teaches people if you struggle to connect and connect deeply, we actually work with you to teach you how to do that. So you can go to wellempowered.com and check out that course and see if that's of interest to you. But it is life-changing when you make those connections, and they're not just for the surface, they're actually deep connections. So thank you, everyone. Again, we appreciate you being here, and we look forward to hearing from you at our next Will Talk podcast. Take care, everyone.